All right, everybody, welcome. I'm not sure, how do we do this? There we go. All right, just waiting for people to come in here. Welcome, everybody. If you can let me know, this is always a bit dodgy to tell if people are here. I can see there's 4 viewers. Let me know. Jonah, nice to see you. Thank you so much for the little post there. Nice to have you, Jonah, as always. Let me know, everybody, who's here live. All I can see on my side is just is just me. So please chat away in the comments there on the side. And to everybody, hello, Deborah. Hello, Sarah. Nice to have you all. Kong Hai, Fat Choi. Happy New Year's here from Hong Kong. It's a beautiful sunny day. Hello, Alina. Nice to have you. It's a beautiful sunny day here in Hong Kong. It's a beautiful start to the year of the dragon. So this is our second Facebook Live here. Hello, everybody. Yeah, if you keep joining in, everybody, please let me know who is here and who is watching. I really appreciate it. Hey there, Flower. Hey, Leanne. Hey, Ellie. Nice to see everybody. All right, so we've got a big conversation here today. And I want everybody, Bernadette, very nice to have you. Thank you for the comment. I want to start this talk by really just encouraging everybody at any moment that you have a question to please post in the comments there. You know, there's no need to wait. This could be a relatively complex topic, especially if kind of esoteric practices are new to people. Peter, nice to have you. Whitney, hey, nice to have you. Welcome. So this could be a complex topic, right? I appreciate that. It might be some ideas that are new. So in full disclosure, I think everybody knows this, but I used to be a secondary school teacher, so there is absolutely no reason to not interrupt what I'm saying. Please, please, please do. If you have questions, just let me know. The idea, the interconnectivity or the interconnectedness of all things in our Reiki practice, it's something that we, in my opinion, we often miss the mark on. Reiki, especially in the West, or to people who are new to the practice, is usually this kind of directional experience. It's kind of a transactional experience or an experience of giving something to somebody else, right? And I was just teaching this yesterday here in Hong Kong as well. And a point came up in that conversation that I'd like to kick off with here. You never hear that type of language. Here's two kind of caveats to our Usui Reiki Ryoho practice and kind of the Occam's razor. Occam's razors are kind of like the simplest explanation must be the truth. Hello, Janet. Nice to have you. Thank you for the comment. So here's the first kind of Occam's razor that I would give for this practice, or in our practice of Usui Reiki Ryoho, and the idea of the interconnectedness of all things, the interrelationship of all things. First off, Usui Reiki Ryoho, much like the major religions of the world or the major practices like yoga, for instance, or meditation, zazen, whatever it might be, they stand the test of time. Okay. So we are now, quick maths, 102 years, give or take a couple months after Usui Sensei's enlightenment on Mount Kurama. Now, that obviously does not mean that this is the foundation of hands-on healing. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying that the practice that we are all gathered here today for, Usui Reiki Ryoho, has stayed in that lineage or in that same form or same concept, at least unless it's been modified by all the teachers, for 102 years, right? Much the same as, for instance, Ashtanga Yoga has stayed the same sequence for its entire duration, right? So why is that important? It's important because if it's not broke, don't fix it, right? And so all of these new lineages that come out and these downloads and all that type of stuff that people claim to be getting, they don't stand the test of time. If you notice, there's always new upgrades. There's always new things happening. There's always a new symbol to learn or a new certificate to get or whatever. But there always is another one and another one and another one and another one. And it's simply not standing the test of time, right? So that's a first serious question to really be posing here. If we're talking about the energy of all things, and we're talking about how all things are connected, as we're going to be looking at here in this talk for this month's live Facebook Live, we have to beg that question. We have to wonder, why is it that there are people who believe that they are constantly evolving and changing the practice of Reiki? The idea that we can evolve the energy of the universe is egotistical. The energy of the universe is already neutral. It is already in balance. It is already in harmony. We need to go to it, not make it come to us, right? We need to recognize that we are part of it, not that we are able to somehow understand it better. There is no better way to understand it than surrendering into Daikomyo. There's simply nothing bigger, greater than Daikomyo. And Daikomyo, by the way, is just Christ consciousness. It's Buddha nature. It's the energy of all things. It's Reiki, it's Chi, it's Prana, it's Satori, it's enlightenment, whatever you want to call it, right? It's oneness, it's non-duality. So this is kind of the first thing. And then the second thing, the second Occam's razor that I would urge everybody to really consider is that anybody who's really advanced in their practice, not just Reiki, but I mean, you might think of priests, monks, Christian monks who go into isolation. You might think of Buddhist monks, Buddhist nuns, right? Nobody who is all that far into their practice will ever make claims that they have downloaded something better or deeper, or they understand something new about the practice. Indeed, it's the opposite. I love this comment: a Zen master's life is one continuous mistake. Because as soon as we believe that we have it figured out, then we are getting entrapped by the mind once again, right? And so if we think about those two things, it helps, I think, to keep us very honest in our practice. Lori, hello. Helen, hello. Aaron, and the internal alchemy. Hello. Welcome, everybody. I think this honesty that's in our practice, it allows us to surrender in to what we're really trying to look at here with the practice of Reiki, right? And here in Hong Kong, this is now probably a week ago or maybe a bit more, I had the great honor, the great privilege, and this just kind of appeared to me. I didn't even plan for it. Actually, it was my wife that got tickets to this, and I didn't even know we were doing it. We were able to go see the Venerable Thich Nhat Hanh. Thich Nhat Hanh is the senior, he is currently, Thich Nhat Hanh, everybody probably knows Thich Nhat Hanh, the very famous Vietnamese Buddhist monk, the founder of Plum Village. He worked a lot, wrote beautiful books on anger and about inner peace and inner stillness and all of these types of things. So Thich Nhat Hanh, it was his senior student, his most senior student. So the person that was probably practicing closest to Thich Nhat Hanh. So very, very beautiful opportunity to be in this audience. And his talk was about this internal state of peace, that if we want to cultivate peace on earth, we can't do anything greater than cultivate peace inside the self. And so this was the whole arch of the talk, was to recognize peace in the self, right? And it was so beautiful how everything in the talk overlapped and balanced and referenced off of to our Reiki practice, right? The conversations and the connections were so clearly indistinguishable from each other, especially if you've gone to the Shinpuden level and you've kind of, gone diligently into your practice to where you are trying to surrender. Amy, hi, how are you doing? Nice to have you. So, when we're looking at this idea of surrendering into the self to cultivate internal peace in the self, it started to get me thinking about what is it that we learn in Shinpuden in particular. Okudan starts to bring us inside. Okudan means the inner truth or the inner art of Usui Reiki Ryoho. And then Shinpuden is this mystery teaching. And we're going to get to the idea of this mystery here in the conversation. But if you have followed along, I know many of you have probably been in my Reiki shares that I hold, that I will be holding again live once I'm back in Europe and on a better time zone, by the way. But in the Reiki share and in our self-practice, there is a practice that we finalize our hand placements on. And this is how I want to start, by opening up this conversation on the inner connectedness of all things and our inner state of peace. The hand placement, the final hand placement in, well, the way that I practice it anyways, and the way that we practice it in Japan, is Tanden choho. And this means to wash it. Ho is the method or an activity, right? And the idea of the Tanden is the sacral chakra, the hara, the dantian, right? The lower heaven, the internal heaven. So if maybe you've seen my most recent video on YouTube about Reiki and Christianity, where I'm talking about the kingdom of heaven lying within, what we're talking about, this heaven that lies within, is the dantian. It's the manger for the birth of Christ, right? And then the light of the North Star shining down the spine. This is what we're talking about here. It's the space of our sacred holiness inside our body. Now, that doesn't make it better or worse than any other area of the body. It doesn't make it any more important. I'm going to explain why it equally is not more important than anything else, yet it remains our focus, okay? And this is what the Venerable Thich Nhat Hanh was talking about in his talk. He was talking about this focus down into the hara. And I'm reminded of Tanden choho, because when we are practicing our hand placements, we go, if maybe you're new to Usui Reiki Ryoho, I'll just try to orientate myself for the camera here so you can kind of see what I'm talking about, if my camera will let me do it. So we go position number 1 for self-healing, number 2, 3, 4 over the throat, and then 5 over the heart. Now you won't be able to see this, but then we go 6 over the solar plexus, and then 7 is down on the Tanden, or the hara. And it's the left hand, and then the right hand on top, and the thumbs are touching. So imagine my belly button is right here where I'm touching with my thumbs. We hold like this, right? And why do we do this? Why are we here? When I'm in Japan and I'm working with my teacher, Inamoto Sensei, he quite often talks about it as this practice to, how does he say it? It's very beautiful. How does he say? He says it's a practice to rid ourselves of addictions and bad behaviors. And I really like this idea, because what are we focusing on? Our hands are over our guts, right? They're over our small intestine, our large intestine. For men, they're over the prostate. For women, they're over the uterus. They're over the kidneys. They're over the ovaries, the testes, the vas deferens, anyways, not the testes. But all of that area, in many ways, is our second mind, right? It's our driving instinct. That's why I'm referencing the reproductive organs. And we quite often talk about the colon, the intestine, the large intestine in particular, as our driving or main mind, right? We have more nerve endings in our intestine, our large intestine, than we do in the rest of our entire body combined. We have more flora, more gut bacteria by number in our large intestine than we have cells in our body. It's a stupendous environment internal to the self. And we know, many of you probably have maybe a scientific or a medical background, or maybe you've heard this before, that a lot of our addictions and our behaviors are driven by our gut flora, right? So like if you crave sugar, it's because there's a certain imbalance in your gut flora. They're finding out now that Alzheimer's is triggered by the flora in our guts as well, because it goes up the vagus nerve and into the brain. I'm not going to get fully into that. I just want to say that this is like the main, it's almost like we're possessed by the bacteria and the flora in our guts, and they kind of drive the ship. So what do we need to do? We need to cultivate a space there where it's as peaceful as possible. And if we can do that, if we bring our awareness to the hara and we cultivate our Reiki practice in the hara, then we start to recognize this peace inside the self. So when we're washing the Tanden via Tanden choho, we have the left hand against the belly. The left is the feminine. And I'm conscious that I might be mirrored by the video here. So this is my left side and this is my right, right? The left is going to be with the bracelets on there. So this is my left hand, and the right hand, the masculine hand, is protecting the feminine. The feminine is protected by the masculine energy in all of us so that the feminine can nourish. The masculine protects and the feminine gives life, right? The feminine dances. All the feminine deities are shown in movement. And most, if not all, of the masculine deities are shown in stillness. So there's a beautiful duality at play here. Again, if anybody has questions on this, just drop them in the comments if you would like any of this explained, yeah? So when we're holding that space, imagine like what we're doing is we're protecting the body, or we're protecting the practice with our masculine so that our feminine can heal and nourish and flow. And the hara, the dantian, the sacral chakra, is all about water. It's about movement, right? Like Bruce Lee, who's from Hong Kong, just right over the bay there, what he always was famously saying is that we need to be like water. We need to move. We need to flow, right? We need to not resist. And when we're working with this practice of Tanden choho, we might hold that hand placement for the duration of our self-healing. We might hold it for 20 minutes. We might hold it for 30 minutes, however long you wish, bringing all of your awareness into the hara so that we can feel the concentration of energy in this space. Now, many of you have taken my courses, I'd imagine, here, who are either watching live or maybe you're watching this in the recording via the Usui Reiki Ryoho group. And in my courses, we talk about the meaning of the word Reiki. Reiki is quite often talked about as universal energy or universal life force. And indeed, that's what it means. But if you break down all of the kanji, the Japanese kanji in the writing, and it's beautiful to be here in Asia because we can break that down. Even here in Hong Kong, the characters within Rei and Ki are very similar to the Japanese and Chinese. So even the people here who can read Cantonese and Mandarin, we always have a lot of fun with them. I can't read any of these things, by the way. So I always have a lot of fun to see them kind of breaking down the symbol. And just yesterday, they were breaking it down yet again. And here's kind of what it loosely translates into. Rei means the rain that falls from the mouth of a female healer. And this rain that falls down lands on the earth. This is kind of the key component. So it's this rain that falls down to the earth to nourish the ground from which rice will grow, that we cook with steam. And then by cooking our rice is universal energy, or the ability for us to sustain life off of the energy of the universe. When we cook it with the steam, then that means it's permeating through the rest of the body. No problem. If anybody has to jump off, no problem. You can catch the recording anytime that you come back. It's going to be live in the group. So when we are working with Tanden choho, we are cultivating this idea of our awareness of Reiki energy in the hara, in the Tanden, in the water of the body. And again, here, if anybody has questions, please let me know, because I'm conscious that maybe you haven't heard these things before. But if we look at the fingers of the hand, right, then we have a number of different elements that we're looking at. And I want to very quickly describe this because it's very important to the talk. The thumbs represent fire. The index fingers represent air. The middle finger represents space. The ring finger represents earth. And then the pinky represents water. So fire, air, space, earth, water. Okay. Now, why is that important? Because notice what we're doing in Tenden choho. We're trying to build our awareness into the hara, into the dantian, and our hand placements are like this. So the fire element of the thumbs is the only thing that we are concentrating on. And the rest of our experience, right, our air, space, earth, and water are overlapping each other, right? So what are we doing? We're cultivating an awareness on the fire, but our fire is in the water of the hara, of the Tanden. Fire and water make steam, right? And that steam is what is being talked about in the word Reiki, the steam that cooks the rice, okay? Now, what is this idea of cooking the rice? Well, the Venerable Thich Nhat Hanh was talking about this, and I'm going to draw it out here for you. I'm conscious that this is going to be, first off, don't ridicule. I'm no artist, huh? I'm a Reiki teacher and practitioner. That doesn't make me an artist. So I'm going to try my best to draw somebody who is kind of seated in meditation. A nice, portly fellow, seated in meditation. So if you can see that. Imagine this is just somebody seated in meditation, right? Kind of cross-legged in meditation. Again, I'm no artist, huh? So I never claimed to be. So what we have here, I'm going to be drawing two kind of triangles on this image, and it's going to talk about our focus of our practice in seated meditation or in self-healing. So first off, we have this triangle going down to this circle here. This is the hara. And then we have this earth energy coming up, right? So we have universal energy coming down, earth energy going up. Now, that might be familiar to a lot of you because we're talking here about the diamonds, the three diamonds, right? We have the universal diamond of the heart energy, and then the earth, the three diamonds of Usui Reiki Ryoho. Notice that these triangles here, they cross. Now, if I know some of you have taken my courses, and maybe some of you will take my courses in Usui Reiki Ryoho, and if you do, you'll learn this, that the mandala, or maybe you have a yoga background and you already know this, the mandala or the image for Anahata, the heart center, is the Star of David, right? In the very center of the image for the heart chakra, Anahata, is the Star of David. Notice if I would have continued the earth energy up here, then I would have the Star of David, right? You can see the six-pointed Star of David being drawn right here, right? Here's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then 6 if I had continued it up here. So why is that important? Because what we're doing is we're looking at the passage of the universal energy down into the hara and the passage of the earth energy up into the crown, Sahasrara, right above the body, okay? Now, when we are looking at the body here in our seated Reiki practice, and this is now getting into the discussions of the interdependence or the interconnectivity of all things. I hope many of you have a daily practice, right? Or at least a semi-daily practice. And what is it that we are trying to do in our practice? Remember, in Usui Reiki Ryoho, there's only 3 aspects to the practice. There's the daily recitation of the precepts, there's daily self-practice, and then there's the attunement or the reiju. We're not talking about anybody else here. We're not talking about giving Reiki. We're not talking about downloading anything. We're not talking about channeling angels or any of that type of stuff, because those things are already in us. We need to surrender the idea that we can do these things to fall in to everything that the Venerable Monk is talking about, right? That goes, again, going back to kind of the Occam's razor that I was talking about at the beginning. If we're going to seek out teachers who can help us turn into the self, we hear this kind of depth of surrendering the practice from these venerable monks, from people like Thich Nhat Hanh. We hear the language of, I downloaded and channeled this new thing. We hear that from people who have just learned the practice, right? Like Inamoto Sensei in Japan never talks about the idea that he downloaded anything or upgraded anything or whatever, because that's attachment, that's the ego, right? We can't get out of our way if we're not doing that. And I'm raising that point here because when we sit down in our practice, we are looking at 3 aspects of the self. There's 3 aspects of our human experience that we need to surrender: our bodily activity, our verbal activity, and our mental activity, right? And if we think about, again, what that means, so my bodily experience, you can interpret this however you wish, right? Because I'm conscious for some people it might be very different. Our bodily experience it's this, right? It's this form that we have. It's this structure of our being. Now, maybe that's where you hold your physical trauma. Like, for instance, you might not be able to see it, but I've broke my arm here many times. And so that's what I mean by physical trauma, right? I might still be trying to heal. There, you can see the scar right there. I'm not, but I might still be trying to heal from that physical trauma. Okay, I'm giving an example here because this is very different than our mental awareness or our mental action. So we have the causal experience of the self in our bodily action. We have the remembrance of our story in our mental action or our mental awareness, right? And so that's what I'm saying. There's a difference between that. The physical act of healing or trauma would be very direct. It would be like, there's a broken bone, it needs to heal. right? The mental response to that might be, wow, it really hurts, or it was really traumatic, or why did that happen to me? Like all of the mental stories that we might have as that's coming up, right? And our verbal activity or action, the verbal is very interesting, right? Because we often forget the power of sound. We often forget the idea. This is again what I was talking about in the video on Reiki and Christianity. In that video on YouTube, I'm talking about the very clearly in the Bible, it's clearly said that the name of God is I am, or to an extension, I am that I am. And in the video, I'm talking about this is the most powerful thing that you can possibly say, because you are already enlightened. You are already Usui Sensei, and you are already the energy of all things, right? So if you say I am, then anything that follows that is the expression of what you are, which is God in action. So if we utter things, and we do this all the time, I do this, everybody does this. Thich Nhat Hanh even does it. It doesn't make, we're human, it doesn't matter. When we say something like I am sick, I am stressed, I am angry, right? That doesn't make any sense. We cannot possibly be those things because we are the energy of the universe. Remember the precepts of Usui Reiki Ryoho, right? Koyo dake wa ikaruna, shinpai suna. Look at those two precepts. Just for today, I will remember, I'm changing the translation here just a little bit to be fair. But just for today, I will remember that I am not angry. The real translation is just for today, do not anger, right? If I spend my activity and the first words that I utter out of my mouth when I wake up are the precepts, which is, again, probably the cornerstone of our practice. If the first thing that I say when I wake up is ikaruna, right? Shinpai suna. Just for today, I will not be angry. Just for today, I will not worry. Okay. That's helping us to remember that we can't possibly be those things. That's our mental space and our physical space suffering. And when we verbalize those things, then it becomes those forms in experience, in action. We project it to the external world, right? So for this diagram, what we are trying to do is we are trying to bring that awareness. Let me see how we put this, not stilling, we can say. We are trying to bring our mental chaos, our physical chaos, and our verbal chaos. We are trying to bring that down. Now, I'm very conscious, forgive me, I'm very conscious that you probably can't read what I'm writing here. But what I'm saying here is we are trying to practice the idea of stopping or slowing or stilling down the mind. We are trying to bring our awareness into the hara, okay? We're trying to bring our awareness down into the hara because if I have the practice of Tanden choho and I am sitting in that practice, right? My awareness is on the lower belly. Then notice what happens. My physical body, my physical acuity of the self, like I was saying earlier, if we think about our body being driven by our gut, well, I'm actively working on quieting down the gut, right? And further to that, I'm actively working on quieting down the mind because my attention is going into the hara. And third to that, I'm actively working on quieting down the verbal experience or the verbal manifestation of the self because I'm bringing my attention inside the self. So the Venerable Monk was talking about this, that we have these flows of energy, right? We have this universal energy coming down and we have this earth energy rising. And in that experience as it moves, like if this is the universal energy and this is the earth energy, as they move through us, we need to become a conduit, right? And it's beautiful because he says the exact same words that we talk about here often in Usui Reiki Ryoho. We need to become a conduit to this flow of energy, right? So what does that mean? It means we need to get out of the way. It means we need to be still in our practice. We need to try to not attach as best we can. It means gyohagime. It means we need to be in. Gyohagime is doing our work diligently and honestly. It's one of the precepts, right? So for me to be diligent and honest, it means I need to be silent. It means I need to be still. It's not always easy. It's not always easy. But it means we need to try to do that as best as we possibly can, right? The Venerable Monk is talking about it. Inamoto talks about it. Usui Sensei talks about it. Thich Nhat Hanh talks about it. The Pope talks about it, right? People who have a depth of experience are all saying the exact same thing. Let go, let go, let go, let go, and be still in the practice. So if we focus our awareness on Tanden Shuroho, on the Tanden, this is very beautiful. This is what he was saying, is imagine that we bring all of our energy, and this is still the mental mind. This is still the mental action, by the way. We are quieting all of these things down, right? So right now, all of our mental action, for those of you who are watching live and for those who are listening on the recording and from me speaking, our mental acuity is busy. We're trying to listen and pay attention. I'm trying to speak and teach off the top of my head. So this is all just flowing, right? And so our mental space is active. And so as we get into the practice, we need to let it still down into the hara. Yeah, Jonna, that's exactly it. Non-judging and be gratitude, right? So if we are grateful for the practice and if we are sitting in non-judgmental witnessing of the practice, then we are simply flowing with it, right? We are allowing, notice this is a perfect way to put it. If we sit in gratitude and without judgment, then what happens to our mind? It quiets down, right? It settles down and it brings our awareness into the Tanden. And so how the Venerable Monk was talking about this was, if we bring our focus into the hara, then you can maybe feel, and I'm putting that in quotes because that means whatever it means to you. I'm very physical in the body, so I can actually feel my body respond. Now, you might be physical in your verbal acuity. You might be physical in your mental ability or your mental acuity, excuse me. And so those things might represent to you differently. You might hear something if your verbal acuity is very strong. You might see something if your mental acuity is very strong. Whatever it is that you experience, bring that awareness into the hara and let it build up as if it's concentrating the chi in the Tanden, right? So that doesn't mean actively. It doesn't mean that we are forcing the energy. It doesn't mean anything except we are bringing all of our awareness into the Tanden. Remember, Joshin Kokyoho, one of the meditations of Usui Reiki Ryoho, is the spirit and soul cleansing breath. This is the exact same idea. We are breathing from the nostrils down into the hara so we can bring our awareness into the lower belly, right? And we build our awareness on the lower belly. And what the Venerable Monk, Thich Nhat Hanh, was talking about was, once that energy is in the hara, then we let it naturally dissipate. He was saying that it feels, so like here again, we brought all of our awareness into the hara. We're bringing all of this kind of sensitivity or action into the lower belly. And then from there, it radiates outward. Naturally, we don't have to do anything for that experience to come forward, right? We don't have to do anything to allow the energy of all things to permeate through all of our cells and every aspect of our being, and then in every aspect beyond our being. So that means kind of the ethereal body, if you will, if that resonates with you, right? It means that we start to recognize that we took the energy, took as active, so I don't mean it like that, but we've become aware of the energy of the universe and the energy of the earth being the same thing, and we've become acutely aware of our, let's use like the term, like our metaphoric battery, our battery pack. We've charged our battery pack, as it were, with that energy. I think maybe that's a kind of a good way to put it. I mean, I'm still doing it, it's still active in the mind, but we can still have focus here because we need to focus on Tanden Shuroho. We need to focus on the hara as we practice, right? Once that battery, that metaphoric battery, is fully charged, then we simply let it dissipate through the rest of the body. And this is why that hand placement, Tanden Shuroho, or just placing the hands over the hara, is so incredible, because it allows that energy to just, how do I want to say, to just permeate or move through the body. Oh, Leanne, that's a good question. Okay, so asking, is our awareness in the hara or hara within our awareness? Great question. Which one, chicken or the egg? Which one is it? Because it's our physical body and because we have our form, then we are bringing the awareness to an area that we are assuming to be the hara, right? The sacral chakra, the Tanden. Now, whatever that means to you, you might feel it, you might not feel it. It doesn't matter, right? Bring the awareness to that part of the body. So what I mean, if you don't feel it, then yes, it might be in the mental. If you do feel it, it might be in the body, right? Regardless of how we are experiencing it, bring the awareness here because it's the base of our life. It's the womb, it's the prostate, right? And from here, we let life flow. The sacral or the hara, the dantian, is feminine in nature, right? So we can say that this is the seat of the Virgin Mary, the divine immaculate conception, okay? Remember, this is a beautiful analogy for this. This is, if anybody here is still listening and you have a deep Christian background, this is going, I hope this really resonates. The idea of immaculate conception is the exact same story that we're talking about with the meaning of the word or the kanji of Reiki. The rain that falls from the mouth of a female healer to nourish the earth from which rice grows, that we cook with steam to nourish our being, right? Well, what is the rice? The rice is the energy of the universe. The universe is masculine. Jesus is masculine. The body that can nurture and support life is feminine. The Virgin Mary is feminine. So this rice that grows up from the earth is the Immaculate Conception, right? And it was shown by the North Star. It was guided, the three wise men, the triple diamonds, right? They're guided in to the manger. The manger is the hara. Here in Hong Kong and in the East, I wish I had, let me see. I don't think I do. I've got some Kung Hai Fat Choi Happy New Year socks. Very festive socks. And I'm getting them because I actually think that they can show you what I'm talking about. Let me see. Come on now. Yes. Maybe, just bear with me. Maybe you can see this. You see that shape? This one right here. It's all over the place in Chinese New Year. And there's a beautiful temple here in Hong Kong where we go to worship Kuan Lin, the divine feminine. And this kind of little boat here, that little shape, this is representing the hara, right? It's the manger. It looks just like the manger. The idea is that we're holding the mudra, or we're holding the energy of the universe like this into the belly, into the hara, so that it can flow from there, right? So we see it over and over and over again. That shape that I'm showing you there on the sock, it represents prosperity. It's quite often depicted as an egg yolk, right? The yolk being gold, and that's like the life, the force of life, right? Being protected in this form. And so anyways, regardless of how you view it, that's what we're bringing that awareness into for the hara. And it's depicted in so many different ways, from the divine conception, immaculate conception, even here to what we see in Hong Kong in Chinese New Year, to the hara, to the dantian, all over the place, right? So we bring our awareness here first, and then we let the energy of all things flow, okay? Once that energy starts to flow, what are we, right? If I bring all of my awareness into the hara, and I sit, and I let the fire burn the water to create the steam, well, eventually, what do we become? There's no mental, there's no physical, there's no verbal, there simply is. There simply is Daikomyo, right? There simply is this increased sensitivity to the awareness of all things. This is something that we get wrong in the practice of Western Reiki all the time. People talk about Honjaze Shoné as the distance symbol, as if I need to sit down and say something in order to connect over distance. We are all connected already, right? We are all connected via the energy of the universe. I can't invoke a symbol that then connects me to all of you. Okay. So Whitney, your question is, Tanden Shudoho done after self-healing, or do we place the hands in the Tanden even during self-healing? You know, you can do this however you wish. How I practice it is like this. If I know that I'm really busy and that I'm really chaotic, like maybe I didn't sleep, maybe I've had a stressful day, maybe I forgot the first two precepts because I'm human, just like everybody else. So if that's the case, then it might be, yes, okay, hold on. Position 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then Tanden choho 7. Okay. If you feel that you're doing pretty good today, you've had a good day, pretty peaceful, you sit down in your practice, you feel very calm and relaxed, then you can simply place your hands on the Tanden. Now, there's one other practice that we can do, and I'm not going to go too far into this because it's a big discussion, but I'll just mention it very quickly. Here in Hong Kong, there's a lot of Tai Chi Chuan, Tai Chi, the movement practice of the circulation of energy, right? And when I'm talking to people who have a very, very deep practice, they've been working for a long time, they say the same thing that Usui Sensei was talking about, the same thing that we learn in our Reiki practice. If you can still down the mind, the body, and the voice, or the three diamonds, it's the same idea. If you can still down your entire experience, Whitney, me, Leanne, everybody in the chat, everybody watching, if we can still down ourselves, then we simply sit with the movement of the energy, right? We simply reside with the movement of the energy, and we can control that by the mind. And I know that we're always talking about a quiet mind, but in many ways, this is the definition of a quiet mind. And so Usui Sensei was talking about this idea that if you were sufficiently advanced in your practice, there was no need to teach. You would simply sit and be conscious of the flow of energy through the body. And if something arises, you can mentally direct it to that part of the body. This is what they talk about in Tai Chi as well. But again, it's very hard to do this. But if you are physical in the body, it might be a little bit easier because you can feel it. If you're very mental and you can see things, then you might be able to see the movement of energy and you might be able to redirect things as well. But I'm just throwing that out there because it begats to this question here for Whitney's question is, when do we do it? Well, the question would really be, in my opinion, how busy are you? How distracted are you? How out of balance are you? And that's not a judgment. We live in the world of duality, so it doesn't make any difference how out of balance you are. The real question is, how are you working towards neutrality again? Right? That's the goal of this. That's the goal of the talk with the Venerable Monk. That's the goal of Usui Reiki Ryoho. And the goal is here. The goal is to bring our awareness into the hara so that we can then let all of this energy, even that is silly. We don't let the energy flow. It already flows like this is how it naturally moves. It naturally flows. We just simply need to get out of the way of that. So we can't do that if we have an active mind and an active practice, right? So then he continued on, and please let me know, everybody, if there's any questions here. He continues on to talk about how there's like these, in the universal energy here, there's this idea of the elixir. Now, this is a little bit, we don't have to get caught up on the terminology. I'll explain it a little bit. This is our area of our, how did he say? Direct experience. So I'll get to that question there in just one second, Whitney. So this elixir field, the elixir is like ether. It's like the field of our external reality coming to us, right? And, the external is our feedback mechanism for the internal state. And so he was talking about this as our direct experience. And of course, the external world, what you perceive and the information that you glean from the external world via your senses and so on, that is your direct experience to the world, right? Of course, what you see, hear, taste, touch, smell, and all that type of stuff. For those of you who have been to Mount Karama, and for those of you who are joining on the tour coming up in April, I know that some of you in the tour are joining, or sorry, some of you in the chat here live are joining. In that tour, when we are on Mount Karama, you will see exactly this point. At the power symbol in front of Karama Dera, there's 6 points of contact to the internal triangle. Those 6 points of contact represent the 6 natures of our direct experience: sight, sound, taste, touch, mind, and body. Okay, so if we can surrender all of those, then we become the 3 diamonds. We become the 3 deities of Mount Karama. If we can surrender all those, then we go into Sonten. We go into this faceless, formless deity, right? So Sonten is really this expression of the hara, of the energy moving through us. And again, this is a big topic. I've covered it before, On YouTube, if you look at the deities of Mount Karama video on my YouTube channel, you can learn a lot more about that. And, so this idea here of the direct experience coming in from the external world, I think it helps to understand, Whitney, your question, where does joy and happiness fit into neutrality? Well, joy and happiness are actually, in some ways, they're forms of suffering, right? Because we can become attached. Neutrality is neutrality. It's neither joyous nor the lack of joy. It simply is. It's neither happy or the lack of happy. It simply is, right? I think that is best summed up with the phrase that probably everybody has heard: if you love something, set it free, right? It doesn't mean attach. Love is neutrality. To be fully loving means to be fully neutral, to be unwavering in your support, right? So we have to look at how these are forms of attachment, okay? And so moving on from that then, what do we do once we recognize this? Well, the hara, the energy from the hara, starts to expand beyond the self, and we end up starting to become aware of kind of this energy field. This is how the Venerable monk was talking about it. So I'm just drawing kind of a quick energy field here. This is a concept in Buddhism that we were talking about. So Thich Nhat Hanh was talking about this kind of lattice work of energy. Now, it's just a metaphor, right? This is not it's just a visual representation. So imagine you have like just kind of lines of energy here that you can maybe experience. Some people might be able to see this. And this is a concept in Buddhism called Indra's web. Indra's web. This might be backwards to read here, I'm conscious of that, but Indra's web. And Indra is kind of like the king of the Buddhas, or like the king of, I'm being very, very basic for the sake of time here, by the way. But you can refer to Indra as kind of like the king of the Buddhas, or the king of the universe, the supreme deity sitting atop the axis mandala, which is like the main central mountain, metaphorically speaking, of Buddhism, right? Which is Mount Meru. And on Mount Meru, this story was told very beautifully because there was a human touch to it. Thich Nhat Hanh was talking about this idea that even Indra got bored. Even the representation of all things was standing at its palace and kind of looking over Mount Meru and just kind of bored with existence that never begins or ends, and wanted this beautiful tapestry, this beautiful fabric to cover this is literally how the Venerable monk was talking about it. He said that Indra wanted this lattice work, or this web, to adorn the balcony of the vantage point to witness all things, right? And I like how the monk was saying that Indra was bored, because it allows us to recognize that we can get bored. Like there's humanity in this. There is duality in our world, and we have to recognize to move through that duality, right? We need to move beyond it. And how this was kind of represented, I'm just going to draw a couple of them here on the bottom, but actually it's not going to take so long, so I'll put a circle at each one of these intersecting points on the web. Now, each one of these circles are represented as a jewel, an incredible, infinitely faceted jewel, right? And this is where we get to the interconnectivity of all things. Each one of these jewels, so I'm just going to number them. I won't number all of them because we won't need, I think the point will come across. So you can see kind of here the numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, right? So each one of these jewels is infinitely faceted. And imagine that this, by the way, is Daikomyo. This is the expression of Honjaze Shone in action, okay? You are this lattice work. I am this lattice work. We are all this lattice work of energy. If you're very acute in your visual senses, you can maybe see this when you're practicing. You might see these kind of ripples behind your eyes of it maybe kind of looks like an ocean, or maybe it looks like, if anybody's seen this, maybe it looks like in Star Wars when they go at light speed and the stars are zipping past, right? These are the types of things that you might say are representing Indra's web. Now, each one of these crossing points, at each one of these crossing points is a jewel, which has an infinite number of facets on it. And because it has an infinite number of facets, then each jewel is a reflection of every other jewel, right? And so what I mean on that is, again, forgive me on this. I wish I had a thing that I didn't want to keep flipping between the screen and not. So I hope this is okay. But imagine we're here on jewel number 1. Now that jewel is going to shine down into number 5, and number 4 is going to shine into number 5, right? And so as 1 shines to 5, 1 will also shine to 4, 4 will shine to 1 via 5, and so on, right? And so 4 shines into 5, and then the reflection of 4 goes all the way to 6, and then it goes up to 2, and so on via an infinite connection in Indra's web, right? And this is a very central tenet to Buddhism. It's this idea that anything that you do to yourself, you can view yourself as one of these jewels on this infinite lattice work of the connectivity of all things. So anything that you do to yourself, you automatically and instantaneously do to the rest of the world, right? You do to the rest of experience. You do to the rest of the entire universe. Anything that we work on in ourselves, we automatically do that to the external world, to the external universe, right? And we automatically impact all other things. And it was very, very beautifully put. And this is kind of the last point that I want to make here, and then I'll open it up to questions. At the end of the talk, a lady stood up, and she didn't have a Reiki background at all. And this is kind of the reason why I was like, man, I really need to convey this information, because it's so beautiful, because it's so, like, it's there. This is one of the tenets of one of the major religions of the whole world, right? You know, she got up, she was suffering. She was like, I've got a dear family member who's in a lot of pain, who needs a lot of help, a lot of healing. How can I help her? And the Venerable Thich Nhat Hanh was like, well, you know, it's not really a question of what you can do to help her. It's more of a question, what can you do to help yourself? If you quiet down yourself, if you quiet down your mind and your body and your voice or your 3 diamonds, if you focus on the Tanden and you let that energy permeate through the body, right? If you allow that energy to move past the self, and if we consider the connectivity that is shown here on Indra's web, then that which you do to the least of me, so do you do unto me, as it says in Christianity, right? That which you do to the least of us, so you do unto us, or unto me, right? Or you treat your neighbors as your brother, right? You are working for the external world to recognize that it's a reflection of yourself. So how do we heal each other? We heal each other by working on ourselves. Shin Shin Kaizen, Usui Reiki Ryoho. It's the continuous improvement method of the mind and then the body that was first talked about by Usui Sensei, right? The continuous improvement method is Kaizen, okay? And Reiki Ryoho. These are the methods of continuous activity on Shin Shin, which is the mind and the heart, or the mind and the body. If we are constantly working on ourselves, it's why in Usui Reiki Ryoho, again, there's 3 aspects to the practice: the precepts, and then the self-healing, and then the attunement. That's it, right? Because we need to recognize the interconnectivity of all things. We need to recognize that we get there by focusing on the hara and allowing the energy to flow, which in reality means we let go of ourself. We let go of our attachment, of our suffering. If we can do that, then as the Venerable Thich Nhat Hanh was talking about, and it's so beautiful, he was saying to this lady, see, if you go quietly into yourself and find peace in yourself, then imagine what that means. It means, imagine that you are the first jewel here, and you quiet down that entire jewel, then that stillness and peace, it's like you can grab, imagine that these lines of energy are like strings on a guitar, right? And you pluck them. You are sending the idea or the neutrality of stillness on those chords of energy. But because your jewel is duplicated and replicated infinitely amongst all jewels in the universe, then the peace that is within you instantaneously becomes the peace of the universe, right? So if you want to heal anybody else, you heal yourself. That's it. And why does this become a problem in Usui Reiki Ryoho? Why do people not get this? Why is it that there's so many other lines of Reiki and so on? I've said this ad nauseum, and I still know that I believe anyways that it's correct, because you can't patent that. You can't, there's no space for your ego. There's no space to make people disillusioned and to manipulate them. If we work on ourselves, then we heal the rest of the world. It's what Thich Nhat Hanh writes about, right? It's what the meaning of the journey of Christ and the Buddha, all of those things are saying that story. Everybody who's locked in attachment is saying the opposite story, right? So if we seek out Indra's web inside of ourselves, and we recognize that if I'm still and quiet, if my internal space is still and quiet, then how can any of you possibly be sick, right? It's not possible. If that seems a little bit far-fetched, that might seem a little bit difficult. I'm sitting here talking to a computer screen. There is nobody in the room. I have no understanding that even any of you are here. So who exists? Me. So where do I focus? Me, right? Where is the suffering in the world? In my mind. It's here. The physical suffering is in my body, right? The verbal violence of the world is in my speech. Right speech, right mind, right action. That's how we find peace, right? That's how we find peace in ourselves. That's how we find peace in the world. And I think that that's so beautifully represented in the practice of Usui Reiki Ryoho, okay? So I hope that helps everybody. I know that there's a lot of conversation here. And the last thing that I want to leave it on is a quote from that talk, which I think is very, very beautiful. And it was this idea of like, well, then what is consciousness? Right? Whitney's question here, it might even help to answer this, or at least in our mind, even in chaos, if we're at peace, then the outside world is peaceful. Yes, indeed. If the internal state is peaceful, then the external world is irrelevant, right? And here's the quote from that talk, that consciousness is an act of being conscious, right? Reiki, the practice of Reiki, is an act of Reiki. And I'm just going to leave it at that. Consciousness is an act of being conscious. I don't really want to dive into that because I just want to let that sit. Consciousness is an act of being conscious. What does that mean to you? What does that mean? Reiki is an act, or the practice of Reiki is an act of Reiki itself. What does that mean? So I hope everybody has enjoyed. I hope you've all enjoyed. Thank you so much for joining. And please, here's some time for questions. If anybody has them, please go ahead and type into the chat box there. And keep in mind that this is going to help everybody in the group. So your questions are going to be on the recording. My responses and my attempt to reply to them anyways is going to be onto the group here as well. And, you know, all of these things, as we journey into this space, as we journey into this experience of consciousness as an act of being conscious, where better to learn that than at its roots, right? When we're asking these questions about, this is why I've made this talk, right? I mean, who better to learn this from than Thich Nhat Hanh's main student? Who better to learn Reiki from than the people in Japan on my next tour that I know many of you are going to be on? Who better to learn and hear this from than the first ever private audience with the head priest of Mount Karama? Like, you can't get any better than that. You can't get any closer to the source. This has never been offered before. Who better to learn about esoteric Buddhism than with the first ever private audience with a senior Ajari monk on the most sacred mountain in all of Japan? We're going directly to the source. Why is it that we go to the source? Because at the source, we hear the simplest and deepest understanding for what it is that we seek, right? It's why I'm constantly going back to Japan and constantly trying to learn and deepen my understanding. And then so grateful to be able to share it with everybody else, because that's what we need to be working with. That's where we need to be going, right? Not the delusions of the mind, not the delusions of the sense of accomplishment that we figured it out. No, let go of all these things. Return to the roots. This opportunity is priceless. This opportunity to be with these individuals who have dedicated their whole life to the practice of the Sonten sect, for example, on Mount Kurama. If you want to learn, join me and meet with the head priest. Be in this audience that has never before been offered. Imagine that. It's like having a private audience with Thich Nhat Hanh or the Pope, right? Who better to learn from than right from the source? So I know all of you have seen it. There's tons of information on the tour. There are still spaces open, and it is coming up April 19th to the 26th. I get asked this all the time. And then I'm sorry, I'll open up to questions, but I get asked this all the time. Are you going to announce it next year? Is there going to be another tour? I will be having other tours, but what I absolutely cannot promise is that I will be able to put together a tour of this magnitude ever again. All of the people on this tour that are offering these once in a lifetime opportunities, I can't guarantee that it's going to happen. It's happening right now, right? This is the present moment. This is the time to seize this opportunity. This is the time to be there with us in Kyoto to learn all of this firsthand, right from the source, right? Imagine what that's going to do to you and to your practice, especially if you teach Reiki. You can bring this back and teach it to everybody. If you have a Reiki business, all of this is a tax write-off as well. And it's never been cheaper to be in Japan in the past like 36 years, right? RJ, oh, nice to see you. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Sarah, thank you so much. Let me just read here quickly if there's any questions. How does one practice joy when they live in an environment with others that aren't happy and are behaving from their trauma, yet you can't leave that environment? Well, that's a big question, RJ. Okay, I'll try to answer these quickly because there's a huge amount to that. And RJ, I love you. I know you. I've known you for a long time, right? So I mean this with all due respect. I don't know if you're talking about yourself. I'm saying this out to everybody. I'm saying that because it's a little bit, I'm going to be a little bit strong on this. That environment is still an expression of our internal suffering, right? So anything that we're living in, that environment that has friction, that environment that has suffering and people who are around us that are toxic, I'll use myself as an example. I'm literally right outside of where I used to teach. And I had this conversation just yesterday. Where I used to teach here created a huge amount of suffering inside of me. It created a huge amount of stress, a huge amount of frustration, anxiety. I got overweight. Many of you know this. I know, RJ, you know this one about me. This is where I had cancer, right? Everything that I was suffering from, it was like my external world was pounding away at me to get on my feet and make a move, make a change, right? And I wasn't listening because of, oh, it's a good job, I'm getting paid, whatever it might be, right? It's all good, RJ, don't worry, right? So, I'm here, and this literally just happened yesterday. My hand to God, this is an exact quote from somebody who's known me throughout that whole journey. I was explaining to them how, being back this time in Hong Kong, I see absolutely not one person that used to create that friction in my life. This is a small community. It's a couple of small bays here. It's maybe about 5 miles long at maximum. It's a very, very close-knit community. It's very easy to see people that you know, but they're all gone. And why are they gone? Because they're no longer in me, right? They're no longer attaching, or I'm no longer attaching to that story. And so it dissipates. When the schoolyard bully can no longer pick on you, they disappear, right? That's what I mean by all of that, right? So if it's still there, then keep seeking inside. What is it that you need to do? Now, it took me years and years. It's taken me 8 years to make that change, right? To let go of all that stuff. It's taken me daily practice, daily Reiki practice, almost daily psychedelic work on myself to do that, to build up the courage, to face myself, to overcome my demons, to let go of my attachments, right? As you let go of all those things, they simply disappear. Okay, that's my thoughts on it. I hope that helps, RJ. Aaron, your question, can you explain the true meaning and use of the distance symbol since it's so commonly misunderstood? Yes, exactly. We don't need to use the distance symbol at all. The distance symbol means that when we are sitting in Sesshin Toitsu, Reiki concentration, for instance, then I can feel something between my hands here, Aaron, right? Well, what is that? Notice what I'm saying. I can feel. So I still haven't let go yet, right? I feel, which means my mind senses something between my hands. But that thing is in the ether. It's in the elixir, like I was talking about earlier. So what does that mean? It means in reality that I'm starting to let go of this idea that I am Bruce. And I'm starting to turn in to the idea that I am Indra's web, right? And as I let go of this idea that I am Bruce, and that I surrender into this idea that actually, hold on a second, I'm connected to all things. That's where we start to recognize the real meaning of Honjaze Shone. Honjaze Shone is the light within me. The light within me recognizes the light within you, right? But I'm still active. I recognize you. What is Daikomyo? We learn Daikomyo in the master level, where you let go, right, of that idea. So we don't invoke the distance symbol to send Reiki. I talk about this in my courses. It would be like saying that I'm going to pour water on the ocean to make it more wet. These are simply the act of an attached mind. We have to learn to let go, right? So what is it that I teach then? I get this question all the time. What is it that I teach? A practice of, and many of you have taken my classes, right? So you're very welcome to chime in and give your thoughts on what I'm about to say here. I hope you've seen this in your trainings with me. What is it that I teach? The act of letting go is the simple, hardest act of our entire existence. At least for me, it's the simple, hardest act. So I teach all of the things that Usui Reiki Ryoho teaches in order for us to learn how to let go, right? The deeper meaning of the precepts, the deeper meaning of the symbols, the meaning of how all of they flow together with the meditations, the journey that Usui Sensei took, the journey and the representation of that journey on Mount Kurama. It's what we're going to experience on this next pilgrimage when we sit in the audience with the head priest, for instance, of Kurama-dera Temple. He's going to be talking to us exactly about the meaning, the real meaning of Sonten. All of those things become tools on your journey of letting go. The counter to that is the Western approach and their tools of attachment, right? Their tools of action, of doing, of thought, of mind, of superhuman abilities and all those types of things. And so we're never advancing in the practice. You can advance a little bit, but the final act is always trying to let go, right? All right, let's see. Any other questions? Any other questions here? I've got about 10 more minutes if anybody else has anything. RJ, let's see. While in a psychedelic journey, I learned to see that person from the place of their trauma. Yes. Yeah. So the question that I would pose from that is, what person did you see? Right? You got physically ill there for 6 weeks. Okay, you're healing from it. That's how we heal. We get physically ill. Our body lets go, right? So who is it? What person did you see? Maybe the external representation, but what is that? Right? When I was suffering here from the school, it was always, you did this, you were doing da, 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 da. In reality, everybody was like, Bruce, would you get on your feet and become a Reiki teacher? Teach this stuff to the world, please. Your voice needs to be heard. Get up there and do it. No, you guys are da, 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 da. It's always you. No, they were my best teachers. And had they not been stern and harsh and made me suffer, then I would have never changed, right? Friction is the start of action, always, right? Like, think about a boulder that's on a hill that's refusing to move. There's a lot of friction, right? You have to overcome that friction, and then inertia takes over and movement takes place, right? All right. Any other questions that I can help with on this talk? Sarah, thank you so much. It's been wonderful to have you. I'm grateful that my insight in all of this is helping. I'm trying to do my best to relay what the Venerable Monk was talking about as well. And if it is helping, I'm very, very grateful. And that's our dedication. That is Yo Hagime, right? If we can stay with the practice, try to stay honest, and keep doing our self-work, That's the whole point, right? That's the whole point. All right. Anybody else? Okay, everybody. Well then, from my heart to yours, as always, be well, everybody. In Gassho to each and every one of you. Thank you so much for joining. And thank you to everybody who's listening to the recording in the future here in the Usui Reiki Ryoho support and community group. Taffy, thank you so much. Nice to have you. I hope everybody's enjoyed. If any questions come up, put them in. This video should be shared. I think I'm getting the hang of it. It should be automatically posted to the group. So these chats are going to all be there as well. Please keep the chat going like we did in last month's talk, right? Keep the chat going. And if you have questions, then it's going to help everybody, and everybody can voice their thoughts on the talk. This idea of the interconnectivity of all things. Seek out Indra's web inside. Seek out Daikomyo. Seek out the stillness in your mind, your voice, and your body. And in that space, we find that we are one. Thank you, everybody. Take care. Hope to see you in Kyoto if you can join. Everybody be well. And Kung Hai Fat Choi from Hong Kong. See you later, everybody.